I always think about it like walking on a map. Like if you keep walking in the same angle, you're going to go to the destination. But if you just went like 1 degree of separation and distance, you're going to end up in an entirely different country with a completely different experience.
Welcome to the Empower and Evolve podcast, a space where we will explore topics ranging from mindset to career to business, energetics, spirituality, cyclical living, and beyond. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I am a mindset coach and integrative practitioner on a mission to help you take your life from meh to magical. Without further ado, let's plunge into today's episode. Hello, my love. Welcome to this podcast episode. Oh my freaking goodness. Today I'm joined by Jenn Moonflower, who is an incredible person. And this topic today, fear and the psyche, embracing shadow work with plant medicine. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about the conversation that Jenn and I both had. So powerful. Let me tell you a little bit about Jenn. Jenn Moonflower is a ceremonialist, plant medicine advocate, and business owner with a deep commitment to community building and education. A certified facilitator in disciplines ranging from Hatha and Yin Yoga to Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy, Jenn weaves over a decade of experience into her unique approach to medicine work. As a nurturing mother and medicine HeArtist, she holds sacred space in ceremonies and blends her holistic wisdom with plant medicine and ancestral teachings. Jenn's passion for exploration and healing shines through in all her offerings. Jenn is magical. I met Jenn at the Earth Daughters Festival back in 2023. It was the year when I attended for the first time and I was just an attendee. Jenn facilitated a couple of the workshops and she was also there with a company called Zoom Garden that she works with. And one of the workshops was Microdosing 101, which I was super curious about. I'd, experienced a little bit of mushrooms beforehand, but I didn't know too much about it. I'd heard about microdosing, but I didn't really understand anything. And so I attended the workshop and I really loved everything she was teaching there and the intentionality of working with mushrooms and how it can help us and how it affects our brain, etc. So I got very curious. And I think it was the next day when she hosted a ceremony with mushrooms at that festival. And oh my goodness, this was one of the most powerful ceremonies I've ever attended. I was hooked. I felt so connected to my body. Then we ended up having the dance party that night. And I was just so embodied in myself and who I was becoming. That it was no joke. And of course, I wanted to get me the mushrooms that she used, the microdose that she used at that festival. So I've been a big fan and supporter of the Zoom Garden company and their incredible blends ever since. I have some show notes in the description for you about Jenn, about Zoom Garden. There's also a discount code that you can use for the mushrooms if you're in Canada. They're amazing. My favorites are Lucid, which is, I mentioned it on the podcast as well. It's the blend that I find helps me kind of turn internal a little bit and just kind of open my mind. Then there's Arouse, which is the blend that I used at that very first ceremony that I attended with her, which is all about getting into your body. And it can also be used for sexual enhancement. And then Party, which is the blend that she mentions that can be replaced instead of alcohol. So those are my favorites. And then I use some of the psychedelic ones as well, like Flow. Anyway, get ready for a freaking juicy conversation. It was so good. So good. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Empower and Evolve podcast. Today I'm here with Jenn Moonflower, which I am thrilled. I love Jenn. I've known her for a couple of years and she's connected me to some pretty beautiful mushroom allies who I've met through her. And I'm excited to have her on here today and talk about fear and making fear our ally.
Hey, Kat, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. Definitely something I'm super passionate about and love to weave into my work, but I think this will be the first podcast interview that I've had really focused on this topic. So I'm very excited to see what comes up.
That's so exciting because I know when we were talking about the topics, you were saying you want to potentially bring some of these topics into the festival season next year, right?
Yeah. So I've been educating on microdosing and macrodosing and working with mushrooms as an ally in more of a ceremonial way. This is coming up to my fourth season in Canada at the festivals. And I find like, as we get a little bit deeper, people are kind of getting beyond the introductory and curiosity stage and wanting to get a little bit, more woven into the nuances and the advancement of working with medicine. So we're not just doing microdosing 101 anymore. We're going a little deeper.
Nice. I love it. Well, this is the perfect segue to tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What do you do? What are you passionate about? How have you found your way to be where you are today?
Definitely. I feel like I answer this question different every time. It's like, many branches of the same tree. But yeah, my journey into working with plant medicine and ancient future technologies such as mushrooms has been kind of a long and winding road. I really started working with these medicines in more of a recreational way, and that soon became very apparent to me that they were to be used respectfully and as a teacher and a guide. And that kind of directed me down the path of doing a lot of my own work and my healing and shadow work, mostly with ayahuasca, but kind of simultaneously at the same time working with mushrooms. And yeah, through that path, I've gone through and done quite a few trainings, a little bit more on like the clinical or therapeutic side with psychedelic-assisted training. And then I've done some more ceremonial mentorship training work as well. That's just been a big stepping stone into me working with Zoom Garden as a microdosing company and kind of just being, on the forefront of educating in Canada with women's festivals and kind of at some EDM festivals this summer, which has been really interesting. I do a little bit of coaching when I have time available, and yeah, I also have an online school called Entheosphere that we are in the process of relaunching right now for ceremonial facilitation, mentorship training, and some more education around microdosing, coaching, integration, things like that.
I love the sound of that. And just as a little bit of a backstory, this is how I met Jenn. I was at the Earth Daughters Festival and I attended her microdosing one-on-one workshop and then the beautiful ceremony, which that ceremony still has such a special place in my heart. Like I tried mushrooms beforehand a couple of times and had some great experiences. And then like being at that ceremony and even at the microdosing one-on-one with you and like learning about the whole intention setting and really connecting with the mushrooms, like that was new to me at that point. And it's now something that I share with all of my friends. Like anytime we take some of the like Zoom Garden microdosing mushrooms, I'm like, okay, like it's set our intention and it's just such a different way to connect to it. And it makes sense because they're alive, right? Like it's fungi. So it makes sense to have that kind of connection. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, maybe with plant medicine and how it has helped you evolve and how you became so passionate about it now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Again, I feel like this is another one of those like I could answer in so many different ways, but this kind of leads into our topic of conversation today, but I really feel like some of the big hard truths that I had to face in doing plant medicine work is learning how to die and like learning how to let parts of me that I was clinging on so tightly as my identity or my, belief systems or, just my ego, like various levels of ego death, and then actually like witnessing myself in full death and what that really means. And that's kind of like it's kind of a taboo topic to get into for sure. But through those journeys, it's really taught me how to be a lot more alive, if that makes sense. Like choosing the life I want to live and being a lot more sovereign and not just, signing up for building someone else's dream as a 9 to 5 and really, being here present and embodied in the work that I want to do and sharing that medicine with the world. And that's really been, pretty aligned with my allyship work with mushrooms.
I love that. I love personally talking about taboo topics. I don't know what it is. Like, I'm like, anything that the people don't want to talk about, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm like, the more controversial, the better. Like, I love it when I'm at a festival and someone raises their hand and asks me something that would totally like get me canceled on social media because I have an opinion or a perspective or whatever. But I like to go there because we're in such an era where things are so seem like black and white and so
Yeah.
sensitive. I'm like, come on, let's just open it
Yeah.
up and talk. We don't have to agree. So
Exactly. Everything is so nuanced. And I've actually experienced a little bit of cancel culture myself before for like saying something on social media. That was my personal opinion, my lived experience, and people basically in my small little town like decided to tear me through the mud. And yeah, it was pretty interesting.
but it makes you so much stronger and connected with what your
Yeah.
truth is, right? And I feel like those opportunities are so humbling because they allow us to really like check in with ourselves if we're able to not take it personally and to see like, okay, am I out of alignment here? Or like, where is this coming from? Because there's always a lesson in those experiences too, right? Like, am I just going to shut down because I'm stirring the pot, or am I going to get a lot louder with my truth? And, if you're ruffling some feathers, you're probably also empowering some people at the same time. So I'm kind of for
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. It's so true. And I feel like the whole topic, and I think this is going to be like the perfect segue into talking about fear as well. Like witnessing parts of you die and letting go of those parts of you that you once clinged on so tightly can be such a beautiful journey. And I find I've in my life currently this is very like alive, and I don't know, maybe you can relate as well, but it seems like a lot of conversations that I'm having with my clients or even friends is like letting those kind of ego deaths happen and parts of us dying, and then how that shifts our network of the people around us and how that can bring up grief because we're grieving friendships and then we're uncertain about like whether this is the right step. But it's sometimes we have to let those old relationships die in order to call in those people that are meant for us.
Yeah, 100%. It's not an easy journey for sure. And like that's a really big thing that, I try to support people with and advise them, or at least inform them of can happen when you're working with mushrooms, especially like in a larger capacity, like a macrodose or a ceremony, is that integration process afterwards because, you don't just go back to the way your life was necessarily. And you want to maintain those breakthroughs and those like aha moments and those nuggets of wisdom that are bringing you more into wholeness of who you are. And not everybody is going to be able to see you in that vibration or respect those changes. And, it can be challenging to integrate and maintain that integrity post ceremony, if you don't have a really supportive network. So sometimes there are like obstacles and hard conversations and definitely strengthening of boundaries that comes with this type of practice. It's not an easy path, that's for sure.
No, certainly not. I'm going to share this because I feel like it's going to just relate to here. One of my mentors said this once, the reason why people kind of get triggered by you changing is because you are fucking with the version of you that they knew, and that is like unsafe for them. Like in a way, it triggers that nervous system response where it just doesn't feel safe. And like that's the reason why relationships change as you change, because yeah, you're fucking with the version of you that they've always known.
Absolutely. And then you can't rethink the way that you were in those situations either, right? Like I definitely like living in an experience like that I'll probably live with the rest of my life. And, it's probably something I've karmically signed up for in this lifetime. And, this person definitely won't listen to this podcast, so I can share a little bit more vulnerably. But a huge piece of my transformation and my work came after I became a mother. I found out I was pregnant on an ayahuasca journey, 3 weeks into being in a relationship with somebody, first period I was supposed to get after being with this person. And, obviously the relationship crumbled pretty quickly after that. And I was ushered into a fully new initiation. But that person still holds the vision and the identity and belief and attachment to who I was, unhealed in that time. And it's so wild to have conversations with someone who sees this past version of myself like many, many, many lifetimes ago. It's pretty wild to see
Right.
that, you know. So yeah, it can be challenging for sure, especially if you can't just let go of all relationships. Some people are going to be in your life no matter the conflict or the friction.
Yeah. Yeah. So is he still in your life right now?
Sort of.
Yeah. Some.
I mean, I would consider myself a single mom for the past 10 years, and definitely I play the role of both mother and father, and that's a challenging journey on its own, but it's what I signed up for in this life, and it's super beautiful.
Yeah. Your daughter is so beautiful. The few times I've met her when she's been also working with you, she's precious. Like it's beautiful to see how all of this work has rubbed on to her in such a like healthy way. At least that's like what I'm seeing from my end.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope it comes back around at some point and she wants to start like, initiating a little bit deeper into this work. Right now, she's very into TikTok dances and golf and gymnastics, but that's all good. She's got her path. But I would say, I mean, we can get into some like generational like trauma healing and stuff too, because I would say like one of the biggest lessons I learned from doing this shadow work and deep death experiences and conquering my fear through working with plant medicine and psychedelics was learning how to strengthen my boundaries and really break out of like a victim mindset into a state of like sovereignty. And that comes with enforcing boundaries and like being embodied in my own self rather than being the victim. And that was
Mm.
like a huge healing that I had through birthing her and going on this journey. And I see it in her because I was always like the kid that was like, oh, okay, they want me to do this. That's fine. I'll people please. I'm going to be quiet. I'm not going to express my truth. I'm going to let people take advantage of me. And that's something I struggled with until I was in my late 20s.
Yeah.
And my daughter will not let anybody mess with her boundaries. If she doesn't feel like hugging someone or saying I love you or people pleasing, she's just so upfront about it and unshaken. And, she's the only grandchild in both my family's line and her father's family line, and I see those changes that I was able to like consciously break that pattern for her, and that's been such a blessing. And again, it wasn't easy, and I'm sure that I didn't there's probably some other generational curses I haven't fixed yet, but she's got her work to do, so we're not perfect.
Yeah, that's a big one though. And that's like a big one that I encounter a lot in my work in the feminine embodiment space is like really breaking the patterns of the good girl and like kind of like you said, people pleasing, like fitting into the mold, like holding yourself back, not speaking your truth. I find that it's very common in like our generation and above that it's just so freaking engraved. So it's beautiful to hear that you've been able to break that and you can see that in her now. I love seeing like wild child girls like her. Like that's just, it makes me so happy because it just means we're really starting to heal that curse that has been on women for generations.
Absolutely. That's like one of my biggest prayers for this next generation is that they don't have to spend such a huge chunk of their life like unfucking themselves,
Yeah.
and that they can just not have to dive to such deep depths and can have, an easier journey just being in their presence and having permission to be who they are and sharing that with the world so it's not so tricky to be in their medicine. So that's like really what I hope to see for the next generations to come.
Yeah. I love that. Beautiful. Let's talk about fear. What's the role of
Yeah.
fear in all of this? Because fear is so, it's so there. Like, this is, I don't know, as a coach, I see this all the time. The fear of being seen, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of failure, the fear of success. Like, fear is just freaking everywhere. So, how do we make fear our ally? What's your journey with this?
Right. Am I allowed to say like mature words or swears on
Yes,
this podcast? Okay.
absolutely. I
I
swear
think
all the time.
just keeping it real.
Yeah.
I think that fear is like the biggest cock block, honestly. Like there's nothing that will hold you back from your dreams and your like happiness and fulfillment and your purpose other than getting trapped in the cock blockery and mindfuckery of fear. Like it's just it is there, and I really think that, we shouldn't be bypassing fear or ignoring fear because it's a very natural and instinctual and primitive messaging system in the body to warn us, right? To warn us of potential danger, to warn us of something that's going to change or something that could cause harm, right? Like fear plays a very important role. But if you hit the blockade of fear and go backwards. You're not going to grow. And fear, I think, like if we can switch that perspective of like not letting fear hold us back and allowing it to inspire curiosity or inspire courage or inspire, respect in relationship and yeah, like I'm going to go into this a lot deeper, but I think rather than it being like a block for you, using it as a warning system for sure to realize that you're on the precipice of change or you're on the precipice of something new or there's going to be a state shift happening. Yes. And this is a good thing. And now we can use that edge of uncomfortability to get curious about what our intentions are and why we're hitting this blockade, And I'm really like passionate about talking about fear because I do consultations, daily with people who are just getting started with microdosing. And, microdosing, the intention is not to get high. The intention is not to change your entire state of being in one dose, right? It's like a maintenance dose. It's like these tiny little aha moments of bite-sized change that's quite manageable. But I would say 85 to 90% of people that I talk to, mostly women, feel that fear is a restriction for them and they don't want to do it or they haven't done it. And I'm like, okay, so let's unpack that a little bit deeper. And, where is that coming from? And can you use this as a tool to identify, what it is that's trying to hold you back? Because fear is a mechanism of the ego. Fear is something that hits us in that instinctual, more 3D physical realm to tell us like, okay, there's some change happening about, and we want you to stay the same because this is safe here, right? And so, yeah, I really am passionate about educating people or inspiring people to get curious about shifting the conversation of fear being, a warning signal or like setting off the amygdala in the brain and a blockade for them into, okay, how can I use this as a tool and an ally to support me in my journey?
Yeah, I love that. And it's so important to recognize, like you kind of said, like what fear is and how it shows up in our bodies. And I'm sure you've probably heard the quote of our body will always choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Like that's essentially what fear does. It keeps us in the sameness because even though our sameness might be pure hell and super fucked up, we can survive in it in some
Heck
way.
yeah.
So then we stay there, but it's everything always starts with awareness and like starting to kind of like you said dig deeper, like where is this coming from, what is the story that you're telling yourself, where did the micro dosing or the mushrooms kind of come in here, and how can people use that as a way to break through that barrier?
Absolutely. I mean, so when you're working with mushrooms, like on a physiological level, when you're doing a macro dose or, any dose that's like a gram and a half plus up towards like a hero dose, you're starting to work in the brain by turning off the default mode or the default network system. So this is like, where we have these massive breakthroughs, and then we kind of come into this big space of neuroplasticity where we can, really start to usher in bigger change or these bigger pieces of integration. And I feel like a lot of people, would like to have that experience or would like to benefit when they're working with microdosing. And microdosing definitely starts to open up neuroplasticity and allows you to kind of get into this place of like having some tangible, long lasting change in the brain, not quite as powerfully and immediately as doing like a macro dose would. But when we're paring it all the way back down to microdosing, this is an opportunity for people to really start to build this relationship of reciprocity and connection to microdosing. And I really believe that it's this is layered, so I'm going to get a little layered here. If I get on a tangent, just let me know. But
Go
uh,
for it.
we're going. I really feel like, working with microdosing and the curiosity about it coming into the mainstream in this day and age is such a paradigm shift from taking pharmaceuticals or more allopathic medicine, where we're learning how to just cope and survive, right? And we kind of just talked about that with the fear thing. And and I will disclaim I'm never here to like in any way, shape, or form discourage people from going down a pharmaceutical route. I definitely think there are benefits, obviously, and they both have a place in this world. So I'm not shaming anybody who takes pharmaceuticals. I've gone down pharmaceutical journey many times, but I think that um, it's a big paradigm shift moving from pharmaceuticals into working with more plant-based types of medicine because it's not an externalized type of process where you're going to the doctor, they're diagnosing you, they're giving you a prescription, one size fits all kind of pill that has a one size fits all kind of solution. And when you're turning towards working with microdosing, it's not going to work in that same way. And so if you have that intention of like, this pill is going to work perfectly the first time and it's going to fix my whole life and I'm just going to let the mushrooms do the work, you're not going to get too far. And so I feel like people are starting to, realize or they're confronting a little bit of this uncomfortable edge with fear because they're wanting to actually unpack these things that are keeping them stuck in this space of coping and wanting to progress through that in a more sovereign way. And that's really what working with mushrooms and plant medicine is going to do. It's going to help you confront those boundaries or blockades that you've created or experienced or have been placed upon you or conditioned upon you in your own mind and physiology to slowly start to navigate through them and unpack them and heal them in a way that's like manageable and not going to overwhelm your entire life, but you're just having these little moments of like, maybe I do need to go to bed at a different time, or maybe I do need to drink more water, or maybe I don't need to let this thought control my entire day today. And it's just these like little tiny pieces of rewiring that we're starting to restructure, you know, taking a walk in one direction, or sorry, one degree of a difference that's going to really recalibrate your direction overall in a long period of time, if that makes any sense.
To me, it does. I hope the listeners as well, because it's like I find it, people come so to you, to you, me, you in general, and they want this like, I want to like change my life, and they expect you to tell you that it's going to be this like big thing and you have to like change every single thing, but it is those little micro steps, those little micro changes that allow you to change your reality. Because otherwise, if you just keep doing things the same way, you're basically just reliving your past in a different way. You're just creating exactly the same results like you've always done because that's what you expected, that's what your past has been. But then if you can just take that little bit of a slight turn, it leads you down a completely different pathway.
100%. I always think about it like walking on a map. Like if you keep walking in the same angle, you're going to go to the destination. But if you just went like 1 degree of separation distance, you're going to end up in an entirely different country with a completely different experience, right? And so it's just that one slight shift that over time you're starting to gradually shift more and more and more, and it gets more comfortable and more easy. But it definitely requires some courage, and it requires you to get real with yourself. And mushrooms, if you can think of them as your co-pilot and as an ally, can really work with you in that way.
Mm.
So, I like to encourage people to think of working with microdosing or macrodosing or mushrooms in general as like sitting beside you in the car. Like you're both working together to get to the destination. You're not just giving them the wheel and letting them take you off wherever, right? Because that could go off the rails for sure.
I love that analogy. Maybe just for those who are like new to this, what is micro, macro versus a hero dose when you work with
Mhm.
mushrooms?
Yeah, I think in general, like a lot of different people in the industry have different ideas about what this means. But when we're thinking about taking a microdose, it's really taking a tenth to a 20th of what would be considered a recreational dose.
Mm.
So, 100 milligrams, anywhere from like 50 milligrams up to 500 milligrams, I would consider a microdose.
Yeah.
500 milligrams is, yeah, half a gram. So for some to most people, that's a little bit more of a stronger microdose experience. But with that range, like you shouldn't be expecting to feel any sort of hallucinogenic properties. And mushrooms work in many different layers and on many different parts of the body and the brain and our spirit and our emotions. And when you're taking a very, very small, subtle dose, you're just tapping into the benefits of mushrooms. So neuroregenesis, helping your brain to build new neurons and fire new neural pathways, which can help you to heal a myriad of things, right? And then there's so many benefits. I I could go on and on, but yeah, mushrooms are really interesting in that way. Like they'll kind of meet you where you're at. And I think that all intentions are really valid as well when you're working with mushrooms. Like it's not just always about healing. Perhaps you just want to find a little bit more joy in your life, or perhaps you want to just like, you're a stay-at-home mom and you just want to feel like some sense of like enlivenment or extra happiness or a mood boost when you're like doing dishes and picking up toys off the floor. Like that's okay. Like we can be in our purpose in all versions of self. So all intentions I think are valid when we're working with microdosing. They all lead you to what you need anyways. So
Mm. And the company that you work with, Zoom Garden, they have like lots of different blends. They all kind of all serve a different purpose, right? Which is nice as well.
yeah, Zoom Garden I think was really formulated or curated on the idea of building formulations and dosing kits and products to fit certain types of lifestyles and integrations. And so again, like not just focusing only on like the mental health side of things or only on the mood or anxiety reducing side of things. It's also they also have products that are like a good alternative to drinking, or a product that's really great to tap into more of the subtle energetic flow of yoga, or more like introspective experiences. So yeah, just like I would say the dosing is more for like different types of personalities and how you want to use it, whether that's at the gym and to boost performance, or in the bedroom and to boost performance there. A lot of different varieties, plus also products that are made for like non-psychoactive benefits that you can pair with microdosing as well.
Yeah. Would you ever pair the ones that are more like the non-psychedelic ones with the psychedelic ones to like get a double bet? Huh.
Totally. Yeah, I think with the products Zoom Garden offers, like you can really curate your specific package, right? Your stack, your bundle. I think all the products are really beneficial and are totally safe to mix and work with and mix and match together. Obviously, you wouldn't mix like an energy with a sleep one together unless you want to see what that feels like. But you know, yeah,
Cool.
lots of room to play there.
You've given me some ideas because I actually have I have the flow ones, which is the non-psychedelic ones. And I use that a lot when I want to get into a creative space and like write or create content or emails or things like that. And now I'm like, oh, if I could pair that with the lucid, which is like the introspection, I wonder like what I can untap there.
Totally. Yeah, I like to play with them a lot in that way too. Like lucid, dialed, flow, chill, and arouse. I feel like I play around with the most. Yeah,
Mm,
it's like choosing your own flavor.
yeah, so fun. And okay, someone who is listening to this conversation, they're like, oh wow, this is like super inspiring. And I know that I have some fears that I would want to overcome. What would you suggest would be kind of a great place for them to start to befriend their fear and maybe bring on those plant allies to help them navigate this journey?
Yeah, so many different ways, and everybody is so different, right? Like some people really benefit from more externalized experiences. So like talking with friends or talking with a therapist or a coach or a safe person, or having a space for them to verbalize and get that up and out of the body. And some people on the other side really benefit from more introspective processes and internal journey work. And some people probably both in the middle. So, I feel like first identifying with yourself what is a safe space for you to navigate through fear, and then arming yourself with tools and giving yourself the time and space to be informed. Like we all have the power of choice, and we have many tools abundant to us to, inform ourselves and to use. And then giving yourself the time and space to unpack that fear, and you don't have to go all the way into like, what is the seed of origin and is this from trauma and everything like that, but giving yourself space to allow fear to come forward and be a part of your journey without judgment, without labeling yourself, or labeling it as fear, allowing it to just be present and to be welcomed as a part of yourself. And well, sorry, maybe not necessarily a part of yourself, but a part of your journey. And identifying that, you aren't your fear, you aren't your thoughts, you aren't your limitations, you're the person that's witnessing all of those behind the veil. and so allowing it to be something that's present and then just beginning to unpack that. And so whether that's through meditation of like non-duality, non-judgment, and just allowing it to come forward and to be witnessed and loved and released, or doing some journaling and, getting really curious with it. Like I've worked with clients. I had this one client, and I won't share too much, but we based her first like 2-3 month container just around the idea of reapproaching the idea of fear. And it was just to get to a microdosing space. I'm like, you know what? Like some people are just gonna take a microdose and it's gonna work out perfectly for them. And some people really need to spend that time getting curious. And I always share with people in ceremony too that if you're coming into a space and you have no fear to take 5 grams of mushrooms, you're probably going to get an ass whooping. And if you're coming into the space and you're like, you're a little bit hesitant and you've got those alarms going off, then it's giving you the time, or it's giving you the signal to try to understand your intention, to know your why, to create some respect and to understand how much you need to take and what you want to get out of it. And so this whole, if you have the power and the awareness and the insight to get really curious with yourself, I think when the fear comes up, finding the tools in the space to understand your why and where that's coming from, and just, surrendering to the journey and allowing it to unpack itself. And, from the why comes the intention, and from the intention comes the goal. And you can kind of just, yeah, unpack it in that way, I would say. And I think journaling is super helpful, or self-inquiry, reflection.
So many like little things that I feel like I want to go into from that section. So you mentioned, if you go into ceremony with 5 grams of mushrooms and you're not afraid, would you say that's a hero dose? Hey, that's not your kind of normal experience?
Yes, I realized I didn't finish answering that question when you asked me what's the difference between a microdose and a macrodose.
I
So
went off subject too. So here we go again.
yeah, so a hero dose is like, it's referenced on podcasts and Joe Rogan and stuff like that. So a typical hero dose is the 5 gram journey. And the idea is either to take it, in a safe setting or a ceremony, or to take it on your own with a trip sitter with, in a dark room with blindfolds on and no distractions. So that's kind of like the idea behind doing a hero dose. But I would say anything like 5 grams and up is a pretty powerful dose. And I definitely don't recommend most people start there.
Yeah.
I would consider a 3 gram journey to be a pretty powerful dose as well. And that's usually where I'll start people in more of a medicinal, deeper ceremonies around the 2.5 to 3 gram mark, at least for the first time that I work with them, which is, I find even when people feel like they're a little bit afraid or hesitant, sometimes just going a little bit higher in a safe environment can help you get out of the day-to-day brainwave states and just get into the medicine, rather than just kind of having your feet in two different worlds, which can sometimes be a bit of a battle and a struggle.
Yeah.
But of course, there's a whole process that goes into determining that factor for individuals.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, anything above a 5 gram dose, you're portal hopping into other dimensions. So
Right. Yeah. As that thought to me is super scary for sure. Like I like 5 grams, I'd be like, okay, like what doors am I like opening? And I believe that's probably one of the reasons also why like ayahuasca has been around me, but I've never done it myself. It's definitely something I'm curious about, but I haven't felt like I don't know if I've ever be ready for it, but I feel like it's not quite the time. Maybe I would want to start with a little hero dose mushroom because I'm a bit more familiar with that plant ally. But yeah, that's like definitely scary. Like oh my God, what's gonna come out of this?
right. I think it's important maybe to note at this point too, like when we're talking about fear and unpacking fear and it being like a cock block, as I called it, it doesn't
Yeah.
always mean that you have to like ignore it and bypass it and just go do the thing. Like maybe in the journey when you're unpacking the fear, it's also telling you like now isn't the time. And maybe there's some other things in your day-to-day life that you need to go and work on until you can come back and feel more courageous in this space. So I don't want everyone to think that I'm just like trying to empower people to ignore their internal instincts and,
Yeah.
and, and work with mind altering substances. But that's definitely something that can come out of the fear exploration, is like, there's some things here that I've now unpacked consciously that I need to pay
Yeah.
attention to before I feel ready to do this, or it's just a full body no, and that's okay too. And learning how to determine the difference between fear and intuition is really
Mm,
powerful as well, because
mm,
they feel differently in the body. And
mm,
yeah, right. So when you can start to lean into the feeling of intuition as like a calm, grounded knowing in the body versus something that's like setting off your alarms and raising your blood pressure, then you can start to know when to listen to the ego being really loud with, fear, or listening to the intuition that's maybe guiding you towards a better choice or a
mm.
good choice for you in that moment.
I love that distinction that you made. I'm going to point it out for those who might not have caught on to it, like the difference between intuition and fear. Because I feel like sometimes that is like people feel the fear and they're like, oh, my intuition is telling me it's not for me. Dude, not your fucking intuition, it's your fear. So like the difference on how it feels in the body is that intuition is that subtle knowing. It's just like this very kind of, you just know, it doesn't like give you any kind of like crazy nervous system response, versus fear is more of that alarms going off, body is kind of triggered, that kind of, would you say that that's like the difference?
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of the projection into the mind of like all the thoughts, the racing thoughts, and like the what ifs. If you're getting the what ifs from it, that's like a fear-based response, I think. But if you're getting like the I know, or like it's you don't second guess it, that's like an intuition. Uh,
Mm,
but it's so subtle, right?
it
I
is
feel
so
like
subtle.
I'm in my mid 30s and I'm still like, that was my intuition. Should have listened to it.
Yes. Oh my God. Same here. And like I literally teach this work, but sometimes I still ignore it because sometimes it's not what you want it to be.
And then you learn the hard way, which is fine
Yeah.
too.
Totally. But I do believe that the more that you can start to create that relationship with your intuition, where if you hear it and you take action, the quicker and easier it will drop in, and it will be a little bit maybe more of a louder knowing than that subtle nudge that it would have been at the beginning.
Absolutely. And I feel like you can call upon your intuition too to start like seeing how that shows up in your body versus just waiting for a reaction of fear, right? And so when you're microdosing, like taking those 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning to sit and call upon your intuition, be like, does this feel right for me today? And what do I need to connect with today? And, you're kind of like tapping into that safe space for your body to give you these cues and this indication versus like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have done that and now I'm here and the alarm bells are going off and you're having a reaction versus calling upon or inviting in a response in the body. And
Mm.
yeah, those are very different mechanisms that we can learn.
Yeah, so true. Hey, I'm gonna like bring it all the way back to something else you mentioned earlier. This is how my brain works. Because when you were talking about your own journey and how plant medicine has helped you, something you said there, and this has actually come up a few times with my recent people, like interviewees that I've had on here, is getting out of the victim mindset
Mhm.
and moving into that empowered place. Like that's something I so firmly believe in, that in order for us to really grow and heal and change, we need to get out of that victim mindset.
Yeah, big time. This
Yeah.
is yeah, I feel like some people think that I'm like maybe a little bit too blunt, or in my coaching work, like I'm really picky about who I work with because I don't want to have a client who wants to be sympathized for. And I feel like that's, kind of a symptom of like being stuck in a victim mindset, is like you want people to feel sympathy or feel bad because you're stuck in that space. And I'm going to try not to like make myself sound like an asshole because I have empathy. I have empathy for people. But when you're in the victim mindset, people don't want to how can I say this?
Just say it like you want to.
They don't want to change. They just want to be validated
Yeah.
for, where they're at. And a lot of this time it can be very simple to get to the root of the problem, and here's the solution if you're willing to do the work to get out of it. And not a lot of people are ready for that yet. And with love and with compassion, we all have our own journey. And I really think that I really feel like on a collective level, even just with the way the world is kind of set up, with our systems of authority and everything, that a large chunk of the collective is still kind of in this victim mentality, blaming everything, polarized, it's I have no power over this, it's happening to me, and I'm going to put the power in someone else's hands to do the thing. I'm going to, and there's just a lot of like collective examples, not really like on a super individual level, but um, yeah, I was even just thinking about this today too, like just with all the things going on in the world, like, there's so much negativity and there's so many like bad things happening, but we also have the power to be sovereign and to choose to inform ourselves and to choose what we buy into and to choose what we want to change in our lives. We're not a victim to everything bad or good that's happening in the world. And if we continue to kind of just feed into that, like, oh my God, that person's doing this and this government is doing that and yada yada, I have no control, you're still feeding into that power and you're not choosing otherwise. Like we are sovereign beings, we have the power of choice, right? So I don't know, that's kind of a long-winded whole other tangent that I can get into, but
And this is one of
um,
my favorite tangents to get into personally.
yeah, it's not an easy one too, especially when you're talking to when you want to help people, right? But I mean, like think of an example as if like, think of if if a client is going to see a therapist or a coach and they're working with that therapist and coach for 8 years and they haven't changed, they are, they're just kind of empowering or like enabling that victim mindset and making a buck. So, do you want to work with someone for a month or 3 months or 6 months and do the work and continue on from there? Or do you want to just like have a space where you can just have your feelings like continuously validated and your stories validated and, and like, I'm not trying to like invalidate anybody's stories or feelings here because it's definitely a huge part of the process, but there's ways to go about it, and it's like whether you're willing to face the parts of you that are ready to shift and integrate from shadow into light, right? So try not to shoot myself in the foot here.
Oh, I shoot myself with this topic in the foot all the time, but I believe that it comes to the place where the right person will hear this and they will get what they need to get out of it, because it's true. Like if you're stuck in the victim mindset and you're choosing to just look for sympathy instead of actually take action to get out of it, like nothing's ever going to change. You're going to stay in that sameness. And like you said, 8 years later, you're still crying over something that happened in the past. Like it's not, you know, what could have happened in the past is terrible. And there comes a place when you need to choose to move forward.
Yeah. And I also think too, like, being in that space definitely serves a purpose for an amount of time, but we don't want to be there forever. We don't want to be stuck in the story and the pain and the trauma and, the symptoms of that forever. We want to heal. We want to be feeling, whole. We want to be in our pure, happy, full essence of who we are. And it definitely serves to be in that space and to be heard and held until we're ready to move out of it. But, it's up to you how long you want to be in that space and in that journey. And yeah, snapping I mean, like I have moved out of victimhood and I probably still fall into it sometimes. And, I'm not a perfect human being, but that was like a huge, huge piece of my journey with plant medicine. And holy crap, was it ever hard to like see those parts of myself and be honest with myself and be humbled in that way where I was like, oh my God, I am projecting and blaming and like, woe is me in these situations. And like, I am literally the only person who can change this. No one can do this work for me. And that's the really like the hardest journey that people need to realize is like you can hire all the gurus and the teachers and the coaches and take all the courses, but unless you're doing the work and actually integrating it and living it, it's just a cool story. You're not really doing anything. So um we all have our own work that we are meant to do in this lifetime, and it's the hardest thing that we can do is face ourselves with courage and compassion and humility to take that journey.
Yeah. So true. So true. And it just has to come eventually to that point. And I'm the same as you, where I choose my clients based on this, because I have compassion, and there comes a space and a time when I will drop in and I will hold you in that space if it's something fresh and you need to be held in it. But there comes a time and a place where, yeah, I can be a little bit harsh and be like how long are you going to choose to continue creating your own suffering, essentially? Like it there does come comes that place where you have to snap out of it if you want to move forward. So yeah, I love to hear that plant medicine has been a part of this journey for you.
Yeah, it's the tough love. It's the tough love mama medicine. Yes,
Yeah,
I love you, and let's fucking deal with this.
and I think that that's ultimately true self-love is when you can actually accept those parts of you that you were once ashamed of or hiding, or, like accept those past versions of you that have been in the blame, shame, justify, and creating the life that you were living at that point, and accept that that's actually part of your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like, what is even time if you spend 1 year there, 5 years, 10 years, when you get to where you're meant to be in this chapter, it's the time that it took is kind of irrelevant. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it
it's
really
all
is about who you become along the journey of getting there.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, so juicy. I love talking about these deep conversations. We might have to get you back for another episode at some point because I know that you had some other really cool ideas that we can go down.
I would love it. I love having these conversations because I always get to the end of them and I'm like, what did we even talk about?
I know, right? It's like
Like,
the best side. It's I don't know if you've ever like recognized it, like if you're like in the flow and you're teaching things that this might be at workshops or even in client sessions, and then like someone asks you like, "Oh, can you repeat what you just said?" And you're like, "I have no idea."
that's literally how I operate. I'll share with you like one of my biggest fears that I've had to overcome for confidence is I'm actually like I have been terrified of public speaking most of my entire life, and that's the work that I do, right? I consistently put myself in front of hundreds of people and try not to pee my pants. Like, but like I even remember like as a kid when I was sharing with you that I really had to like overcome this like people pleasing, not speaking my truth, my boundaries. Like a big part of that was not being able to show myself in front of people, and I would physically get sick on days that I'd have to present anything in school, like anything I had to do individual, I would like sick day in the nurse's office, could not handle it. So that was like a big part of the process, and just like this conversation, I think whenever I'm in front of a bunch of people and that fear comes up, I'm like, okay, moving myself and my bullshit out of my way. Come back to you later. Love you, and we need to do this now. And then yeah, it's just that space of flow. Which is
Yeah.
always
It's so great when you can get to that place because I remember when I first started to kind of build my own business and do like master classes and things like years ago, I would literally, I was telling this to my client this morning, I would literally create this script like word for word. And I would like have it in front of the camera so I could read it and it would look like I was speaking into the camera, but it was actually a script because I was just like so afraid that I would get things wrong. And now I'm literally like I don't even like I just have like okay, my intention is this is what I'm bringing to this group, this is kind of some of the points, but it all goes out the window because it's just
I love that. I really think that's like the shift from becoming knowledge based into wisdom based, right? It's like
yeah,
being an instructor versus being a teacher.
yeah.
And that's definitely been a big part of my journey too. Like I remember my first yoga class I ever taught, I wrote down all of my poses and stuck it in my bra. And so okay, everybody close your eyes. Oh my God, what are we doing next? Like, but it disconnects you from like what really needs to come through in that moment. And both are okay, right? People will get what they need to get out of being in that space, regardless of what you say. So it's quite the journey.
It is a journey. I love hearing that you're also a yoga teacher. Of course you are.
Yeah, I have 500 hours of yoga teacher training, but I quickly
Oh,
learned right away that I was like, I actually really like teaching with my eyes closed to get into like the mind space
yeah.
of the journey and the feeling with people. So I went into like more meditation teaching, and then that just went into teaching with like binaural beats, and then that kind of evolved into microdosing, and it's just been a big mishmash of things.
Cool. I love hearing people's like origin stories of like how they've kind of gotten to where it's so cool to see and the different like modalities that have kind of like blended their way into who you are today. That's really, really neat. Coming back to the fear of public speaking, just because I feel like this is again very relatable. When this shows up now, how do you support yourself through that?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a pretty like anxious prone person just in my my life. I don't say I have anxiety, but I deal with anxiety sometimes. It's not mine, but it's there. So when that comes up and I'm feeling a little bit like flustered towards that fear of, public speaking or being in a space where I'm like really being seen and the attention's on me, it's like I just notice that fear start to feel dysregulating, and I spend my time leading up to it not in my head. So I try to do everything I can to get out of my head and stop. Like, I don't write down the notes, I don't prepare the script. Like, I spend my time leading up to those spaces regulating my nervous system. So I go and I love doing a cold dip. I think a cold dip is great because it helps you get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And there's like nowhere else you can go other than inside of yourself in that moment. So I find that, cold dip will really upregulate and downregulate and activate the vagus nerve. It's a really great way to both soothe and activate the nervous system, or anything just grounding. So yeah, I would say for anyone who's like in that space of like teaching and they feel like they need to really prepare, or they get really like tripped up with public speaking, the biggest goal is like get yourself out of your own way and give yourself the space to regulate and tap into flow beforehand. Like, before I do a ceremony, I'll spend the entire day, no calls, no talking to people, no scheduling, and just like taking the time to do my practices so that when I do show up, I'm embodied in that authentic version of myself that I want to come forward, not being run by the fear controlling side of myself that's trying to control the narrative and the story, right? So but everyone's practice is going to be so different. But yeah, I would say like focusing on the nervous system regulation so that you can be clear and present,
Yeah.
not trying to control everything.
Yeah, I love that. That's a key for me as well. It's like really just coming into regulation, recognizing I'm safe. And it sometimes it's as simple as just starting to look around like, oh, okay, like what's around me? No, I'm actually not in danger. And just those little things. Yeah. Something else I want to point out that you said that I feel like people might need to hear is you said, it's not my anxiety, I live with it. This is something I actually like to teach as well, instead of like personifying or like in taking it on as yours, like whether it's a disease or something that you deal with. Stop calling it mine. It's not
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah, I think that's just like the trickery of language, right? When we
Yeah.
identify it and we personify it in that way, it becomes so real because we're literally spelling it out into our
Mm.
life. So yeah, I think like those little subtle tricks and cues can really help you to rewire who you
Mm-hmm.
are and what is yours. And I have a meditation. Obviously, I can't share the whole meditation on here, but one way I really love to help people shift out of being controlled by their physical or their mental or their emotional is by going through these like different layers of the body one by one and acknowledging, okay, like you're doing a body scan. I have fingers, I have skin, I have a heart, I have blood, I have all these things that make up my body, but it's not me. It's what carries me. And then you go through the emotions. Okay, I have all these emotions coming up. They're here, they're beautiful, they're part of my story, but they are not mine. They're just there. They're part of this moment. They're part of what I'm witnessing. So going through these different layers, and then when you get to the thoughts, realizing that the thoughts come in, and we have the choice if we want to unpack those thoughts, if we want to attach judgment or positive or negativity or labeling to these thoughts, or we can just witness them and allow them to come and go. And then we start to realize that as we peel back these layers of the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual realms, then we start to realize, okay, who am I that is witnessing all of these things that I thought were me? And
Yeah.
this has been like my lifelong journey. I remember asking my mom this when I was like 6. I'm like, okay, mom, if I have skin and bones and a tongue and a breath and I have thoughts, like what am I? And she's like, what the hell? I don't know. You're special. That's what I get called. You're special. So I bring that into like my practices, and I think that's a really powerful way for people to feel empowered in their own journey and then not getting tripped up by all of these things that feel a certain way or think a certain way or show up in our current state. And then you can start to really like get curious about like, okay, who is the eye behind the eye? And it's a fun journey for the individual to take.
Mm-hmm. It's such a fun journey. Yeah. when you go from being somebody to being nobody to being everybody to being anybody.
Yeah, I love that.
Joe Dispenza. I can't take the credits, but that's like his teachings. And I
Yeah,
really love that because that's ultimately like the evolution of consciousness, I find.
right. And then you just realize that the anxiety that you're feeling or the fear, the reactions that you're feeling is not such a big deal. We don't have to get so wrapped up in it. We're just another little like blip in the micro and the macro universe, and it's all beautiful. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's so interesting.
This has been so fun. I have one last question for you. This is always my ending question. For those listening and they're like curious and they're like, whoa, the topic was like mind-blowing. I have my eyes open. What would be your one piece of advice to the person listening?
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'm gonna base it around fear, and I'm gonna I'm gonna say, like, if there's something that you're waiting to do in your life, whether it's starting a new project or starting a new routine or speaking the truth about something or making a change in your life, starting a business, whatever it is, don't wait until you feel like it's perfectly ready to go, and just get started. Just do the baby steps that you need to do to start microdosing that reality into your life and get going. Because I will tell you that with all of the crazy things that I've ever done in my life, I never thought I was perfect or good enough or the expert or the master in any of these things when I started. And it really is such a journey. And, whether you're becoming a teacher or a coach or a leader, or you're just like learning how to share what it is your medicine, um, you're going to be journeying and learning about that and evolving that version of yourself for the rest of your life. There's no starting when you're at the destination. It's a journey. And so I think feel the fear, acknowledge your why, and surrender to it and get curious and do it anyways.
Yes, I love it. What a way to end. Thank you so much, Jen. This has been such a juicy topic.
Yeah, this was so fun. I'm also really bad with like on the spot questions, so I'm glad I found that.
Again, just get out of the mind and just like trust that whatever needs to come through comes through. And that's why I don't tell anyone that I like to ask this question at the end.
I love it. I love the surprises. Yeah, that was super fun. Yeah, I would love to come back and chat some other conversations and topics with you. And thank you so much for like inspiring all the tangents that we went on today. It was a great time.
Thank you. And we'll for sure get you back. And thanks everyone for listening. Thank you for tuning into the Empower and Evolve podcast. It means so much to me that you've taken time out of your day to tune in. If you're open to it, and if you love the episode, I would love to invite you to take a couple of minutes to rate and review the podcast on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This will help me reach new audiences and share this message more broadly. And if this episode really struck a chord with you, I would like to invite you to share it on social media and tag me at It's Coach Kat so we can spread the love together. Until next time, I'll catch you there. Bye.